Hello everybody. So it was really interesting reading your posts about what you learned about poverty when you were growing up and how that fits into the three different discourses that you were reading about this week. And I wanted to address those different discourses before you had the test, because I noticed that there was some confusion about them, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was really clear about them. So the first discourse I think that's very important to understand is the moral underclass discourse, which is called MUD for shorthand. And you can hear in the words moral underclass that we're talking about poverty as a moral issue, and that some people have lesser morals than other people, and that is why they're in poverty. That's the idea of the moral underclass. So anytime we hear words like lazy, uneducated, cheating the system, unmotivated, criminals, we are talking a moral underclass discourse around poverty. And I want people to really question that theory, that discourse a little bit more than I saw in some of the posts. And in a lot of the posts, what I read was that, when I was growing up, I was told work hard or you'll end up without an education and end up on the streets as a beggar, and look what happened over there. And then kind of along with that, what people were saying was that folks who were beggars were actually choosing the easy way, right? So they're just sort of lazy, and instead of working, they're choosing to beg. And I really want us to pause there and think about that for a second, and think about how, why that came to be and how that could even make sense. The idea that someone would choose to beg, would choose to really be viewed by everyone walking by as less than, as not important, it is really problematic. Like, that is quite unlikely. People who are begging are there because that is the last thing available to them. They can't find work. They can't get an education. They've had to leave their homes. That is what's left. That the government is not paying welfare or child support or anything to them. And so I want us to walk away from judging that, and really, especially in India, thinking about how this moral underclass is actually has like a huge prevalence because of the caste system. In India, you don't get a choice. If you're born into a lower caste, that's, even if you're like the smartest kid ever, your life is still kind of laid out for you in terms of what you're able to achieve and what you're able to do. And there've been a lot of work to sort of undermine that, but I think that is still very present. And when people wrote about other countries in the world, there's a similar sense that, being born into a certain neighborhood, into the ghetto, being born a peasant in rural space where there aren't a lot of opportunities, limits people. And that systemic limiting of people, that fits into another view of poverty, which is the redistributionist view, which basically says that the problem with poverty is that things income is not being distributed equally. And some people have more of it, and there's a lot of people who aren't getting enough, and the government needs to redistribute income and I would say opportunities as well, so that people have enough. And that really looks at policies as being the cornerstone of how we get rid of poverty, as opposed to the MUD discourse, which tells us the way that we get rid of poverty is by pulling up our bootstraps and working harder and, not being lazy anymore. So we have these two, and then we have SID, and a lot of people are like, it's SID, it's SID, it's SID, this is SID. SID is very specific. A social integrationist discourse. It's very specific, and it has to do with employment and employment opportunities. And basically it says people are poor because there aren't the right jobs. And if we created the jobs, or if we made people work, then people would not be poor anymore. And in Ontario, that looked like a workfare program. So in order to get welfare, you had to do workfare and you had to do jobs. And it does not deal with the sort of how do we redistribute income and opportunities for people. It really is about, very simply, if we could create a job for someone, then they wouldn't be poor anymore. And I think most of us who see what it costs to live in Toronto and how much money you make with a job that's precarious and part-time would say that just by having a job doesn't mean that you're not going to be poor. So yes, in order to not be poor, most people are going to need jobs, but the simple creation of jobs does not necessarily mean an end to poverty. Okay, so we have moral underclass, we have redistributionist, and we have the social integration discourses. And if you were not clear on them, I really suggest taking the time, going through the chapter where it talks about those discourses and gaining an understanding for yourself, because it's possible that you can just look and say, oh, everybody else wrote SID, therefore I'm going to write SID, but that doesn't help you learn. And if the first person who wrote SID as what they thought was being represented was wrong, then it means you're not going to learn too. So really make sure that you read it for yourself, understand things for yourself, and get yourselves ready for the test on Friday.